Compare and contrast. Well, a compare and contrast is kind of a big deal. It's we do it all the time. You know, we compare things. You know, when we want to buy a car, or we want to choose a class, or we want to choose a pet, perhaps. So it's an important skill that you know you're going to use all your life, whether you do it in education or in school, or whether you do it in real life at home, deciding on what you're going to have for dinner. You know, you might have to base that on the ingredients that you have in your house. But anyway, a compare and contrast is a type of analysis. So when you analyze something, you've got to break it into smaller pieces. So you break a big topic into its subtopics, and you do that for both subjects. So you compare two subjects, right? Two different things, dogs, cats, for example. So you break up, you find what they have in common. Well, they both have hair, they both have eyes, they both have ears. Those are probably not the things that you're going to compare, though. Maybe their personalities and their mannerisms or whatnot. So you might look more at things like how loyal they are. And so there's something about that. You might say off the top of your head that cats are not loyal, but you can definitely compare the topic between dogs and cats. How loyal are dogs compared to how loyal are cats? So you would, of course, use evidence and reasoning and stuff, but you want to look at both subjects, how loyal dogs are, how loyal cats are. You also want to look at opposing arguments. So some might say dogs are loyal for these reasons and with this evidence, and others might say dogs are not so loyal because of these reasons and this evidence. And you got to do the same with cats. So you got to be fairly thorough when you're looking at each subtopic of, in this case, loyalty. You want to give a certain degree of balance between both topics. You need to give cats the same amount of attention in your essay that you give dogs. Otherwise, you're being unfair to cats if you don't give as much time in your essay, or as much space, more or less, approximately, in your essay. If you spend all your time talking about dogs and then very little time talking about cats, then your argument is going to be biased. So you need a degree of balance between your two topics. Not only that, but you should have a degree of balance between your argument and your opposing arguments. You don't want to have no opposing arguments or too little of an opposing argument for each subtopic, because then it's going to look like you're biased and you're not really giving the other side of the argument a chance. So let's see. Let's take a few moments to talk about the structure of each section of the essay. So yeah, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a body, and you're going to have a conclusion. All right. In your introduction, you've got to create interest from the beginning, right? Create interest for the reader. You've also got to establish why this comparison is important. Well, that'll help get me interested as it is, just knowing that it's important for you or for society or for economics, socially or historically, whatever you're comparing and contrasting. Give me a social reason, an economic reason, historic reason, or some other reason why it's important. Otherwise, if it's not important and you can't establish that it's important, then there's no point in writing, and there's no point in reading what you're writing down. So make sure you establish that. If you're comparing and contrasting dogs and cats, as I said, perhaps the reason is many people have pets, and some of them don't choose the right pets. That is, they choose pets for the wrong reasons or whatever. That might be a good demonstration, a good example of demonstrating importance in the topic. Okay, you also need to, in your introduction, you need to summarize the points of comparison. So what points are you going to compare and contrast, of course? So if you're going to compare and contrast dogs and cats in terms of body section 1, safety, body section 2, loyalty, and whatever the third and fourth body sections are. You can summarize those points in your introduction so that the reader can easily see that you're moving from one topic, or that your essay is going to move from one topic to the next before it concludes. Subtopic, right? Okay, so besides that, you've got to have your thesis. So in a compare and contrast, depending on exactly what you're doing, you may simply say what subject is better than the other. Beyond the introduction paragraph, you've got your body paragraphs, of course. Well, in the typical 5-paragraph essay, one topic constitutes, or should I say subtopic. So one body paragraph is focused on one subtopic, and the next body paragraph is focused on the next subtopic. But in a compare and contrast, or any kind of essay really, as you get older and as you get wiser and better at writing, sometimes a topic isn't fully covered in one paragraph. You might need more than one paragraph to cover one subtopic. So I'd rather think of the body in terms of sections or stages of development rather than one body paragraph focused on one topic. So anyhow, in your body, you will need subtopics, right? So the first subtopic and the second subtopic and the third subtopic should all basically be handled in the same way. So I'm just going to talk about one section of the body of the essay. Well, in a compare and contrast, you need to have a subtopic like we've talked about, loyalty or safety. So loyalty. So you compare dogs to cats in terms of loyalty. The more probable and maybe obvious and maybe biased conclusion is that dogs are more loyal than cats. But you can't go into the paragraph or the section, you can't go into that stage of the essay just assuming dogs are more loyal. You've got to provide evidence and explanation. And then you can't just go in thinking that cats are not loyal. You've got to provide evidence and explanation. So if you do that, or when you do that, I should say, you'll need to be balanced. You'll need to have your essay balanced. Dogs, cats. If you talk about one more than the other, it's going to be biased. So if you talk about the evidence that dogs are loyal in one paragraph, and in the same paragraph probably you want to use opposing arguments. So what would some people say to demonstrate that not all dogs are loyal? So you've got to have that opposing argument there. You want to balance not only between one topic and the other, dogs and cats, but also a balance between the affirmative and the negative, or the your argument or one argument. You got to have a balance between one argument and another. Okay, and then so you might have one paragraph focusing on dogs and the next paragraph focusing on cats, but both of those in the same section of the essay related to loyalty, to that one subtopic. Make sense? And then when you get to the end of that section, you've got to establish by reasoning and by using the evidence and reasoning whether you think dogs or cats are more loyal. So you've got to come to the conclusion. So first, yes, I'll go back. First, you present one side of the argument for one topic, and then the other side of the argument for that same topic. Then you present one side of the argument for the other topic, and the opposing argument for that topic. And then you make a conclusion. Based on all of that, what do you think is the right answer? All right? And then that is one stage of development for that section of the body. Then you'll need another stage of development, and that might be safety or whatever, and you'll do the same sort of thing. So by the time you get to the end of the body section, you should have a few sections and that you can weigh. So if, let's say, one section based on loyalty, you affirm that dogs are more loyal, and then the next section you maybe base it on safety, and you determine that dogs help a family be safer than cats would. And then the third section, whatever it is, favors cats because they're independent. Maybe the third section's on independence, and cats are extremely independent. So maybe you favor cats in the third section, but when you weigh them, you've got 2 in favor of dogs, 1 in favor of cats. So overall, at the end of that body paragraph, the section of body paragraphs, you're going to have weighed in favor of one animal or one topic over the other, and so you can conclude. You can put that in your conclusion. So there's something else, you guys, before we get to the conclusion. Make sure that when you're moving from one subject to the other, you're very clear about it. So that's a transition. So sometimes we talk about transitions in one way, and we just say, in conclusion, that's a transition, right? But that moves from your body to the conclusion. You say, in conclusion. It establishes you just move from one section of the paper to the other. Yeah, that's one type of transition, but simply you might just say, dogs. There's a transition. Now we know we're talking about dogs. And then you say, but as for cats, and then you transitioned into this other topic, so it's clear. So make sure, no matter whether you're moving from one section of the paper to the other, or from one topic to the other, or whatever it is, make sure you're using words and phrases and sometimes sentences that indicate you're moving from one thing to another. As for your conclusion, really you do not need a very long conclusion, at least not for this essay, not for me in this essay. So you will need to refer back to your thesis statement. I would probably start with that first. Of course, you need to revise it and make it a bit more in depth than your thesis statement in the introduction. Follow that with your points of comparison that you made, and that weighed heavier for the dogs or for the cats or whatever, one of the topics over the other. Follow that with discussing why it is important at all to compare these two. And if you had a hook of some sort, return back to that hook and clean up your loose ends, tighten those loose ends, and you should have a nice solid conclusion and hopefully a nice solid overall essay. Good luck. Happy writing.